December 25th, 1991. Christmas night, the Soviet flag was lowered for the last time. One of the most powerful empires in human history collapsed. An empire that covered nearly 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. A nation with thousands of nuclear warheads. An army considered one of the strongest in the world. A superpower that reached space before anyone else. A nation that stood against the United States for over 40 years. But in the end, America survived.
And the Soviet Union fell.
To understand how it all collapsed, we need to go back in time. Not to World War I, not even World War II. We're going even further back to a war most people never talk about. In 1904, a massive war broke out between the Russian Empire and Japan. The reason, a region called Manchuria. And in the end, Russia suffered a humiliating defeat. The Russian people were already struggling with poverty, corruption, and terrible living conditions. But this defeat was the breaking point. People flooded the streets. Protests erupted across the country. But the government responded with bullets. Thousands were killed. That day became known as Bloody Sunday, and it marked the beginning of the Russian Revolution. As chaos spread across Russia, different political groups began fighting for control. But one group stood out from the rest. The Bolsheviks, and leading them, a man named Vladimir Lenin.
Товарищи, рабоче-крестьянская революция, о необходимости которой все время говорили большевики, совершилась!
Lenin believed Russia didn't need reform. It needed a revolution. A violent one. The government saw him as a threat. So they exiled him to Siberia, one of the coldest places on earth, but history wasn't finished with Lenin yet. In 1914, World War I began. And despite Russia's collapsing economy, Tsar Nicholas II made a fatal mistake. He entered the war. The war drained Russia completely. Food shortages spread across the country. Millions suffered. People were starving. By 1917, Russia was collapsing from within. Workers went on strike. The streets filled with protesters. And then something shocking happened. Parts of the Russian army joined the revolution. At that moment, the Tsar knew it was over. Soon after, Nicholas II stepped down from the throne. The Russian Empire had fallen. But the story was far from over. As the Russian Empire collapsed, one man was preparing to seize power. His name was Vladimir Lenin. When Lenin returned to Russia, he found a country exhausted by war, hunger, and political chaos. The people wanted food, they wanted peace, and above all, they wanted change. Lenin understood this better than anyone. His message was simple: peace, land, bread. 3 words that would change history forever. Millions of Russians rallied behind him, and in October 1917, the Bolsheviks launched a revolution. Government buildings were seized, political opponents were arrested, and within days, Lenin and the Bolsheviks took control of the country. The Russian Empire was gone. A new era had begun, but victory did not bring peace. Russia soon descended into a brutal civil war. The conflict divided the country into 2 sides: the Red Army, loyal to the Bolsheviks, and the White Army, made up of their enemies. For years, the two sides fought across the vast Russian landscape. Cities were destroyed, millions died, and the country was left in ruins. But in the end, the Red Army emerged victorious. The Bolsheviks had won. In 1922, they officially founded a new state, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the Soviet Union. Shortly after, Lenin died, and a new leader rose to power, Joseph Stalin. Stalin would become one of the most controversial figures in modern history.
Еще одна причина. Так как люди стали жить у нас лучше, чем в старое время.
Under his rule, the Soviet Union transformed from a largely agricultural nation into an industrial superpower. Factories appeared across the country, railways expanded, military production exploded. But this transformation came at a terrible cost. Millions suffered under political repression. Thousands were imprisoned. Many never returned. Yet despite the brutality of his rule, Stalin succeeded in turning the Soviet Union into one of the most powerful nations on earth. Then came World War II. In 1941, Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history. More than 3 million German soldiers crossed into Soviet territory. At first, the German advance seemed unstoppable. Entire Soviet armies were destroyed. Cities fell one after another, but the Soviet Union refused to surrender. The harsh winter arrived, supply lines collapsed, and the German army began to crumble. The fighting became some of the deadliest in human history. Millions died on both sides. But when the war finally ended, the Soviet Union stood victorious. It had survived, and it had become a global superpower. After the war, a new conflict began, the Cold War,